The world, to most, was a cacophony of sights and sounds, a jumble of experience. To Kael, it was a symphony. Every blade of grass vibrated with a faint, verdant hum. Every stone held a deep, resonant bass note. The rushing river played a flowing, crystalline melody, and the wind whispered complex arpeggios through the leaves. This was the fundamental truth of existence, the system's true nature. Everything was resonance, a cosmic song. Kael was a maestro, one of the rarest and most misunderstood classes. While warriors cleaved and mages chanted, Kael played. His instrument, a simple six-stringed lute crafted from pale, polished ashwood, was not merely a tool for entertainment. It was his conduit to reality itself. He didn't cast spells, he composed. He didn't fight, he harmonized. Name, Kael class, apprentice maestro, level 4, 580 or 500 EXP. Primary attributes, dexterity, dex, 16, for nimble fingers on the fretboard, resonance, RES, 20, his core attribute, determining his connection to the world's song. Presence, PRE, 14, his ability to project his music and influence. Willpower, WIL. 12 core skills, minor chord of softness. Active. A short, gentle melody that temporarily makes non-magical objects slightly less rigid. Mana cost, 5. Whisper of the Wind. Active. A light, airy tune that can subtly guide small currents of air. Mana cost, 3. Attunement. Passive. Allows the maestro to perceive the basic resonance of objects and creatures. String repair. Passive. A minor, mundane skill for basic instrument maintenance. Kael's current gig was a far cry from the grand orchestras of the system. He was performing for a small, bored crowd of merchants in the dusty backwater town of Oakhaven. His minor chord of softness could loosen stubborn knots in cargo ropes, and his whisper of the wind could make his voice carry clearly across the square, a useful but hardly heroic application of his power. He earned a few coppers, a stale loaf of bread, and a smattering of polite applause. It was enough to keep his strings from breaking and his belly from aching, but it was not the destiny he felt stirring within him. He finished his set, tucked his lute carefully into its worn leather case, and headed for the town's only tavern, hoping for a cheap meal. That's when he heard it. Not with his ears, but with his soul. A jarring, sickening sound that ripped through the harmonious fabric of reality itself. A dissonance. It wasn't a noise. It was an absence of noise. A void where there should have been a vibrant chord. The air shimmered, not with heat, but with a profound wrongness. The ground beneath his feet seemed to shiver. The faint, verdant hum of the nearby forest turned sour, flat. He looked up. In the distance, over the rolling hills, a strange, dark cloud was gathering. It wasn't a storm cloud. It was too dense, too silent. It radiated an anti-sound, a vacuum that sucked the joy from the air. People in the street began to murmur, their faces etched with confusion and a nascent fear. A farmer dropped his basket of apples, but the thud seemed muffled, wrong. Even the rowdy adventurers at the tavern door quieted, their boisterous laughter cut short. Kael clutched his lute case. He could feel the dissonance radiating from the chiu. Cloud, a corrupted melody that threatened to unravel the world's song. His attunement skill was screaming at him. He could see faint, grayed-out lines in the air, like cracks forming in a beautiful painting. "What is that?" someone whispered, pointing a trembling finger. An elderly woman, a village seer with a gentle, glowing aura, stumbled out of her hut, her eyes wide with terror. "The silence! It's coming from the Meyerlands, the Dissonant Cultists. They're performing the chord of nullification!" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. The Dissonant Cultists were a shadowy faction, fanatics who believed the system's song was a cage, a limitation on true power. They sought to break it, to unravel reality into pure, uncontrolled chaos. Their ultimate goal was to play the chord of nullification, a devastating anti-melody that could sever an entire region from the system, turning it into a barren, skillless wasteland. Elara, the stern village elder and a sage with a shimmering golden aura, appeared, her face grim. The Mirelands are lost. If they complete the ritual, Oakhaven will be next. We need to send word to the capital. But Kael knew. He could feel it in his bones, in the thrumming strings of his lute. The dissonance was spreading too fast. There wasn't time. The chord of nullification wouldn't just sever Oakhaven from the system, it would create a void, a silent pocket that would slowly grow, devouring the world's song. He couldn't let that happen. Not to his symphony. He looked down at his humble lute. Its strings vibrated with a faint, hopeful harmony. It was a simple instrument, and he was just an apprentice, but he was a maestro. He could perceive the dissonance, and perhaps, just perhaps, he could compose a counter-melody. He opened his system interface. A new urgent quest had appeared, shimmering with a frantic red glow. Urgent quest, counter the dissonance. Description: the Dissonant Cultists are performing the chord of nullification in the Mirelands, threatening to sever the region from the system. Objective: reach the source of the dissonance in the Mirelands and disrupt the ritual before the chord of nullification is completed. Recommended level: 20+. Reward: 1000 EXP. Access to advanced resonance skills, favor of the system. Failure condition: irreversible system corruption of the region. Recommended level 20+. He was level 4. It was suicide. But he was the only one who could truly hear the threat, who could understand its nature. Warriors fought with steel, mages with spells. He fought with music, and the world's song was depending on him. He tightened the strap of his lute case over his shoulder. He took a deep breath, letting the harmonious resonance of the world around him fill his spirit, pushing back against the encroaching silence. He would go to the Mirelands. He would find their anti-melody, and he would compose a counter-symphony that would make the very fabric of reality sing. The Mirelands lived up to their name. Even before the dissonance had truly set in, they were a treacherous expanse of black, fetid water, gnarled skeletal trees, and treacherous quicksand bogs. Now, with the encroaching anti-melody of the chord, of nullification, the very air seemed to weigh heavy, pressing down on Kael's spirit. The vibrant hum of life, even the morbid kind that thrived in swamps, was muted, distorted. His attunement skill was overloaded. Every rustle of a reed, every croak of a bog frog was a broken note, a fractured chord. He could see the gray cracks in the air intensifying as he moved deeper, like shattered glass. The dissonance was almost physical, a cold, heavy blanket that sought to stifle his own inner harmony. His path was guided by the epicenter of the dissonance, a throbbing void in the heart of the swamp. It pulled at him, a magnetic field of anti-energy. He moved slowly, cautiously, his gaze flicking from the distorted scenery to his interface, which now displayed a dissonance proximity meter. It was steadily climbing. He knew he couldn't fight the creatures of the Mirelands in the traditional sense. His lute was not a weapon for physical combat. He had to be stealthy, to navigate the corrupted landscape without drawing attention. He focused his Whisper of the Wind skill, not to guide air, but to mute the sounds of his own footsteps, making him light and silent as a ghost. He used Minor Chord of Softness to subtly loosen the mud around his boots, allowing him to pull them free from the muck without a telltale squelch. It was slow, arduous progress. He occasionally passed corrupted creatures. A bog serpent, its scales dull and gray, slithered past, its usual venomous hiss replaced by a rasping, tuneless wheeze. Its attack skill, Venomous Bite, was grayed out in Kael's perception, its connection to the system severed by the dissonance. These weren't monsters to be feared, they were victims, slowly dying as their very essence was unraveled. His goal wasn't to kill them, it was to avoid them. He conserved his meager mana, using his skills sparingly, listening intently with his attunement. He needed to understand the dissonance, to hear its structure, its rhythm. Only then could he hope to counter it. As he drew closer to the heart, Of the Meyerlands, the dissonance intensified to an unbearable degree. It was no longer just an absence, it was an active assault on his senses. His head throbbed, the world seemed to wobble at the edges of his vision. He gripped his lute, its familiar ashwood a comforting anchor in the chaos. He finally reached a clearing. In its center, surrounded by a ring of twisted dead trees, was a structure unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a crude, hastily constructed shrine of jagged black stone and bone covered in strange, glowing purple runes, and before it, a circle of robed figures chanted in a low, guttural monotone. They were the Dissonant Cultists. Their auras, which should have been vibrant and unique, were dull, almost black, pulsing with the same anti-energy as the air. In the center of their circle, hovering above the crude altar, was the source of the dissonance. It was a shimmering obsidian sphere of pure, solidified anti-sound, pulsing with corrupting energy. It was the chord of nullification, slowly gathering its power, feeding on the life song of the Meyerlands. Kael could feel it. The entire region was a vast, complex melody, and the cultists were playing a counterpoint, a parasitic anti-chord that was tearing it apart note by note. They were close to finishing. The sphere pulsed brighter, its malevolent hum growing stronger. He needed to get closer, to understand the intricate structure of their anti-melody. He ducked behind a cluster of gnarled roots, using minor camouflage to conceal himself. He held his lute, his fingers hovering over the strings. He could feel the dissonant frequencies, the jarring rhythms they were creating. He heard the words of their chant, not with his ears, but with his attunement. They were ancient guttural sounds, each word a specific frequency, a fragment of the anti-chord. He saw the patterns, the way their voices wove together to create the nullification. It was a masterpiece of destruction, an inverted symphony of chaos. He needed a skill, a new skill, one that could counteract this. His current F-rank abilities were like trying to stop a tidal wave with a pebble. He needed something that could directly manipulate resonance at a deeper level. He thought of the dissonance, of how it created a vacuum, a silence. What was the opposite of silence? Pure, unadulterated sound. But not just any sound. A sound so pure, so perfectly in tune with the world's song, that it could pierce through the chaos. A sound that was a fundamental truth. A prime chord. He focused his intent, pushed his mana, and whispered, "I need to hear the true song. I need a counter note." His resonance attribute flared. The system responded, interpreting his desperate need, his desire to hear beyond the static. Core concept, defined, counter resonance. New skill acquired, harmonic insight. Rank D. Description: allows the maestro to perceive the foundational, harmonic structure of any system-bound entity or phenomenon, provides vulnerability and counterattack opportunities against dissonant effects. Mana cost, 15 per minute of active use. A D-rank skill. It was a major leap. He immediately activated it. The world shifted. The gray cracks of dissonance still shimmered, but now, beneath them, he saw something else. Faint, shimmering lines of golden light. The true, underlying song of the Meyerlands, being slowly smothered by the anti-melody. He saw the vulnerable points in the dissonance ritual, the moments when their chant faltered, when the obsidian sphere pulsed just a little less intensely. He also saw something else. The cultists, for all their power, were not immune to the dissonance. Their auras were slowly corrupting, becoming extensions of the anti-melody. They were becoming hollow, their own life song fading. Their focus was absolute, their attention entirely on the ritual. This was his chance. He wouldn't fight them with force. He would fight them with a better song, a song of harmony. He lifted his lute. His fingers, guided by instinct and the precise information from harmonic insight, began to pluck the strings. He didn't play a melody. He played a single, pure note. A note that resonated perfectly with the underlying golden light of the Meyerlands. A note that was an anathema to the dissonance. Tew was a small sound, almost swallowed by the oppressive silence, but it was enough. The obsidian sphere pulsed erratically. One of the cultists faltered in their chant, their eyes flickering with confusion. Kael pushed more mana into the note, his presence a tribute amplifying its subtle power. He began to layer it, adding a simple, clean harmony. The dissonant cultists finally noticed him. Their heads swiveled, their black auras flaring with rage. "Silence him!" one of them shrieked, their voice a jarring, broken chord. Kael knew his time was running out. He had to play faster. He had to compose his counter-symphony before the Myrlands and the world were lost to the silence. The dissonant cultists abandoned their chant, their anti-melody fracturing into chaotic noise as they turned their full fury on Kael. 3 of them, their forms shimmering with a sickly purple energy, charged towards him. They weren't warriors. Their power lay in corrupting resonance, not physical combat. But their corrupted auras could disrupt his very being. Kael didn't flinch. His fingers, nimble and sure, continued to dance across the fretboard of his lute. His harmonic insight was working overtime, showing him the specific dissonant frequencies each cultist emitted, the gaps in their chaotic energy, the precise counternotes that would unravel their attack. He played a rapid staccato chord, each note perfectly calibrated. It wasn't an attack. It was a disruption. Harmonic disruption, rank D. Description: creates a targeted frequency burst that disrupts dissonant energies and breaks chaotic spell constructs. Mana cost: 10 per burst. The first cultist, a robed figure with a menacing bone staff, stumbled, the purple energy shimmering. Around their weapon flickered, momentarily dissolving. Kael sidestepped, avoiding a clumsy lunge. He was too fast, his movements a fluid dance, his dexterity and resonance working in perfect sync. The other 2 cultists tried to flank him, their hands glowing with corrupting energy. Kael saw their intent, to create a field of dissonance, to silence him completely. He responded with a sweeping, arpeggiated strum across his lute. Resonance reinforcement, rank D. Description: creates a localized field of pure, stabilizing system resonance, countering minor dissonant effects and strengthening allied auras. Mana cost: 20 for a 10-second duration. A shimmering golden aura erupted around Kael, pushing back against the encroaching silence. The cultists' attempts to create a dissonant field faltered against his reinforced harmony. They hissed, their corrupt auras recoiling from the pure energy. This wasn't a fight of brute force. It was a battle of musical theory. They were trying to unravel the world's song. He was going to recompose it. He needed more power. He needed higher rank skills. He thought about the central obsidian sphere, the chord of nullification. It was still pulsing, still growing. It was the source of their power, but it was also a massive, unstable construct of pure dissonance. It was a chaotic, discordant symphony in itself. Could he not only disrupt it, but consume it? Could he turn their anti-melody into his own source of harmony? He focused, pushing his harmonic insight to its limit. He saw the structure of the obsidian sphere, not just as a void, but as a negative space, a powerful potential waiting to be filled. If he could introduce a perfectly resonant counter-frequency, he could cause a harmonic feedback loop, a surge of energy that the dissonance could not contain. He began to play a complex melody, a precise sequence of notes that formed the mathematical inverse of the chord of nullification. It was agonizingly difficult, pushing his fingers to their absolute limit. Every note had to be perfect. One wrong strum, and the entire structure could implode, taking him with it. The cultists, sensing his renewed focus on the sphere, redoubled their attacks. One of them managed to land a blow with their staff, a dull thud against his shoulder. Pain flared, but Kael ignored it, his concentration absolute. The golden aura of resonance reinforcement pulsed, holding them at bay just enough. He reached the crescendo of his counter-melody. He unleashed a final, sweeping chord, a pure, resonant blast of energy that pierced the air and slammed into the obsidian sphere. The sphere didn't shatter. It convulsed. The chaotic, purple energy of the dissonance, unable to contain the pure harmony, turned inwards. It was a musical implosion, a collapse of corrupted frequencies. Dissonant construct overloaded. Chord of nullification is collapsing. Unique action performed. Dissonant energy harmonized and absorbed. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You are now level 8. New skill acquired, Dissonant Absorption. Rank C. Description: user can absorb ambient dissonant energy or the collapsing remnants of dissonant constructs, converting it into mana and minor EXP. Effective against Dissonant Cultists and their creations. New skill acquired, Aura Edit, minor, rank C. Description: allows the Maestro to subtly alter the resonance of a non-combatant's aura, improving minor aspects, e.g., charisma, dexterity, or removing minor negative dissonance. Requires direct contact. Mana cost, variable. The obsidian sphere vanished in a silent flash of imploding purple light. The oppressive dissonance that had choked the Mirelans lifted like a physical weight. The air brightened. The golden lines of the true world song, once faint, now pulsed with renewed strength. The cultists, their source of power gone, screamed in despair. Their dark auras flickered, dissolving into gray smoke as the purest harmony of the Mirelans reclaimed them. Without their source of dissonance, their corrupted forms simply ceased to be. Kael stood panting, his lute still humming with the aftershocks of the counter-melody. His shoulder ached, his mana was completely drained. But the quest notifications were still pouring in. Urgent quest, counter the dissonance, complete, reward 1000 EXP, access to advanced resonance skills unlocked. Favor of the system has been granted. He looked around. The Mirelans were still a swamp, still dangerous, but the pervasive sense of wrongness was gone. The trees no longer looked dead, they looked ancient. The bog frogs, once silent, began to croak a tentative, hopeful tune. The world was singing again. He was no longer just an apprentice maestro from Oakhaven. He was the one who had stopped the chord of nullification. He had faced the silence and answered with a song. His journey as a maestro had truly begun. He had absorbed dissonance and learned to manipulate auras. His instrument was a weapon, and his music was a shield. The world's symphony was vast, and he was ready to compose his own epic. News traveled fast, even in a world governed by system notifications. The tale of the young maestro who silenced the chord of nullification in the Mirelans quickly reached the ears of the Forgers Guild and the Adventurers' Council in the capital city of Eldoria. Kael, once an anonymous busker, was summoned. Eldoria was a city built on grand, resonant architecture where every stone seemed to hum with an ancient, powerful magic. Kael's attunement skill was overwhelmed, perceiving layers of harmony and counter-harmony in the very foundations of the city. He walked through its streets in a daze, his lute strapped to his back, feeling both awed and profoundly out of his depth. He was ushered into the grand hall of resonance, a vast, echoing chamber where the system's ley lines converged. Before him sat a council of elders, a stern archmage, a formidable high paladin, and a serene oracle whose aura pulsed with unimaginable wisdom. And then there was Elder Alara, the sage from Oakhaven, who offered him a small, knowing smile. "Kael, the maestro!" the archmage boomed, his voice resonating through the hall. "You performed a feat that baffled our most seasoned mages. You unraveled the dissonance with music." "The world is a song, Master Archmage," Kael replied, his voice more confident than he felt. "The Dissonant Cultists played an anti-melody. I composed a counter-symphony." The oracle, her eyes closed, spoke, her voice like wind chimes. "Your connection to the system's true nature is profound, young maestro. You possess a rare insight. Tell us, what did you perceive in the dissonance?" Kael explained how he had used harmonic insight to understand the anti-melody's structure, how he had used harmonic disruption to break its patterns, and finally, how he had collapsed it with a perfect counterchord. He spoke of the pure, golden light beneath the dissonance, the world's true song. The council listened intently. When he finished, the oracle slowly opened her eyes. "He speaks of the prime chords," she whispered, her gaze fixed on Kael. "The foundational melodies that comprise all of existence. To perceive them, it is a gift of the progenitors." "The prime chords?" Kael asked, his mind racing. He had always felt there was something deeper, something fundamental to the system's song. "Indeed," the Archmage confirmed, a flicker of excitement in his stern gaze. "The Dissonant Cultists seek to corrupt these very chords, to unravel reality into chaos. They believe that by shattering the world's song, they can unlock a true power, a primordial force that existed before the system." "But they are wrong," Elder Alara interjected. "That path leads only to annihilation. The dissonance is not power. It is a void. And now, they seek to unleash something far worse than the chord of nullification. They are attempting to awaken a dissonant behemoth." Kael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool stone of the hall. A creature of pure dissonance? That sounded like a walking apocalypse. "We believe they are preparing a grand ritual," the High Paladin explained, his voice grim. "Somewhere in the Dragon's Teeth Mountains, a region already prone to chaotic resonance due to ancient magic. They plan to play a Shattering Symphony, a series of corrupted prime chords designed to awaken this ancient horror." Urgent quest. Seek the prime chords. Description: the Dissonant Cultists are attempting to awaken a dissonant behemoth in the Dragon's Teeth Mountains using corrupted prime chords. You, as a maestro, are uniquely positioned to understand and counter this threat. Objective: travel to 3 locations of deep natural resonance, learn fragments of the true prime chords, and then confront the Dissonant Cultists in the Dragon's Teeth Mountains. Reward: access to prime chord manipulation, legendary title. Failure condition: the awakening of the dissonant behemoth and the potential collapse of the world's fundamental resonance. The stakes had just been raised from a regional threat to a world-ending catastrophe. He was level 8, far from the Archforger or High Paladin, but he was the only one who could hear the song. He was the only one who could learn the prime chords. "Where do I begin?" Kael asked, his resolve hardening. The oracle pointed a slender finger at a tapestry depicting a shimmering waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear lake. "The Whispering Falls. There, the constant, pure flow of water holds the prime chord of flow. Then, the ancient redwood grove, where the deep-rooted life force of the oldest trees resonates with the prime chord of growth. Finally, the celestial spire, a mountain peak where the air itself sings of the heavens, holding the prime chord of Aether. These were not quests for battle, but for learning." Kael knew that. He had to absorb the essence of these places, to internalize their pure, foundational melodies and somehow translate them into a counter-symphony. It would be his most challenging composition yet. He accepted the quest. He was still a simple maestro, but now he had a purpose far greater than busking for coppers. He was to learn the song of creation itself and use it to save the world from ultimate dissonance. Kael's journey to the Whispering Falls was not a simple one. The world was vast, and a maestro's path was rarely direct. He traveled through dense forests, across rolling plains, and over sun-baked hills, using his nascent aura edit, minor, skill to subtly influence wary guards into letting him pass, and suspicious innkeepers into offering him a warmer welcome. His dissonant absorption skill, while powerful against cultists, was useless on the common monsters of the road. He had to avoid direct combat, relying on his whisper of the wind for stealth and his dexterity for evasion. The dissonance proximity meter in his interface now fluctuated wildly as he moved across the map, a constant reminder of the unseen war being waged. The cultists were everywhere, trying to spread their corrupted influence, weakening the system for their grand ritual. He saw faint gray cracks in distant mountain ranges, in the hearts of bustling towns, tiny tendrils of the dissonance touch. He couldn't fight them all, but he had to find the prime chords. Finally, after weeks of travel, he reached the Whispering Falls. It was a place of breathtaking beauty, a colossal waterfall that cascaded down sheer granite cliffs into a vast, azure lake. The air here vibrated with a palpable energy, a clean, pure harmony that instantly soothed Kael's senses after his long journey through a subtly dissonant world. His attunement skill was overwhelmed, but in a joyous way. He could hear it. The deep rumbling bass of the falling water, the crystalline chime of the spray, the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. It was all a single flowing melody, an unending song of constant motion and renewal. This was the prime chord of flow. He knew what he had to do. He had to internalize this melody, not just intellectually, but physically, spiritually. He had to become one with the flow. He took out his lute. He began to play, not a complex melody, but a series of simple, repetitive notes, each one mirroring a fragment of the waterfall's song. He sat by the lake's edge, eyes closed, his fingers dancing across the fretboard. He let the sound of the falls wash over him, immersing himself in its rhythm. He played for hours, until his fingers ached and his mana reserves were almost depleted. As he played, he started to perceive not just the sound, but the essence of the flow. He felt the ceaseless movement of water, the way it carved stone over millennia, the way it nourished life. He felt the underlying current of the world, the constant, immutable forward motion that defined existence. He saw new patterns in his harmonic insight. Not just the vulnerabilities of dissonance, but the inherent strengths of pure resonance. He saw how the water flowed around obstacles, how it gathered momentum, how it always found a path. Prime chord of flow, perceived and internalized. New skill fragment acquired. Fluid motion. Passive. Description. User gains enhanced agility and grace of movement. Evasion chance increased by 5%. Physical stamina regenerated 1% faster when in motion. Resonance attribute increased by 3 points. Mana regeneration increased by 5%. You have gained 500 EXP. The feeling was exhilarating. It wasn't a flashy skill, but it was fundamental. He felt lighter, his movements more fluid. It was a piece of the world's true song, integrated into his very being. As he concluded his long session, he felt a subtle shift in the air, a faint, discordant hum that hadn't been there before. His attunement skill flared, alerting him. The dissonance proximity meter, which had been blissfully low here, was ticking upwards. He looked up. 2 figures emerged from the tree line, their dark robes and flickering black auras unmistakable. Dissonant Cultists. They must have followed him, or perhaps they were drawn by the surge of pure resonance he had just created. They were not subtle, their steps crunching loudly on the dry leaves. "The Maestro," one of them rasped, their voice like gravel. "We felt the surge. You meddle with forces you do not comprehend." "I comprehend the world's song," Kael countered, rising to his feet, his lute ready. "And you are out of tune." They sneered. "Our master will revel in your dissonance. You will be the first note in his shattered symphony." They didn't charge directly. Instead, they began to chant, a low, guttural anti-melody that started to form a familiar, chilling construct, a localized chord of nullification, a smaller version of the one he had faced in the Mirelands. Its purpose was clear: to silence him. Kael knew he couldn't let them complete it. Not here. The prime chord of flow was too important, too vital. Its pure harmony could not be corrupted. He had a choice. He could try to disrupt their ritual again like before, or he could use his newfound understanding of flow. He thought of the waterfall, of its ceaseless, overwhelming power, how it eroded stone, how it swept away all in its path. He thought of the prime chord of flow. He began to play, but this time, his melody was not a subtle disruption. It was a torrent. He poured his mana into a rapid, cascading series of notes, each one reflecting the raw power of the falls. He wasn't just countering their dissonance, he was drowning it. New skill created. Torrent of harmony. Rank C. Description. unleashes a powerful, focused wave of pure resonance, capable of physically pushing back targets and overwhelming dissonant effects. Mana cost, 30. A shimmering, invisible wave of pure sound blasted forth from his lute, slamming into the cultists. They were not just pushed back, they were lifted off their feet, tumbling backward through the trees. Their nascent chord of nullification sputtered and dissolved, unable to withstand the overwhelming physical force of his harmony. They scrambled back to their feet, dazed and disoriented, their black auras flickering wildly. They looked at Kael with a new dawning fear. He was no longer just a musician, he was a force of nature. "This is not over, Maestro," one of them shrieked before they turned and fled into the forest, leaving behind only echoes of their broken dissonance. Kael stood, chest heaving, his mana completely spent. He had repelled them. He had protected the prime chord of flow, and he had gained a new weapon, born of the waterfall's mighty song. He was learning. He was growing. He was composing his epic. 2 more prime chords awaited him. The ancient redwood, grove, the celestial spire. He had to learn them all before the Dissonant Cultists could shatter the world's symphony for good. The journey to the ancient redwood grove was marked by a growing sense of urgency. The dissonance proximity meter on Kael's interface steadily climbed, mirroring the increasing reports of localized system anomalies, withered farmlands, frenzied wild beasts, minor magical skills failing unpredictably. The Dissonant Cultists were intensifying their efforts, attempting to soften the world's defenses to make it more receptive to their shattering symphony. Kael knew time was running out. He arrived at the ancient redwood grove, a place of profound peace and immense power. The trees here were truly ancient, their colossal trunks reaching towards the heavens like pillars of living earth, their canopies so dense that only dappled sunlight pierced the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and permeated by a deep, slow, resonant hum. This was the prime chord of growth. His attunement skill perceived it as a complex, intertwining melody, a chorus of slow, powerful bass notes, and soaring, verdant harmonies. It was the song of life itself, of constant renewal, of deep roots and reaching branches, of cycles of decay and rebirth. As before, Kael understood that he needed to immerse himself, to become one with this profound harmony. He found a clearing amongst the colossal trees, sat down with his lute, and began to play. His initial notes were hesitant, simple echoes of the ambient hum. But as he focused, as he let the immense, patient resonance of the grove fill his being, his music deepened. He played of roots plunging into the earth, of sap rising, of leaves unfurling to greet the sun. He played of the slow, inexorable force of life, expanding, growing, conquering. He played for a full day, stopping only when his fingers protested and his mana reserves were completely exhausted. During this profound immersion, his harmonics insight revealed layers of growth, not just in plants but in all system-bound life. He saw how skills developed, how auras matured, how experience points fostered evolution. It was all a grand, beautiful symphony of growth. Prime chord of growth perceived and internalized. New skill fragment acquired, vitality surge, passive. Description: increases maximum health by 10%. Minor wounds heal 2% faster. Resonance: attribute increased by 3 points. Mana regeneration increased by 5%. You have gained 700 EXP. Kael felt a profound sense of groundedness, a deep wellspring of resilience within him. His body felt stronger, more vibrant. The subtle aches and pains of his journey receded, replaced by a vigorous energy. The prime chord of growth was a part of him now, but his meditation had not gone unnoticed. Just as he finished playing, a rustle in the undergrowth announced new arrivals. Not cultists this time, but something far more unsettling. 3 figures emerged, their forms twisted and warped. They were once creatures of the forest, a bear, a wolf, and a stag. But now they were abominations. Their fur was patchy and gray, their eyes vacant. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, and their auras, once wild and vibrant, were now dark, corrupted things. They were blighted creatures like the ones in the Mirelands, but far more powerful. And they were being driven by an unseen force. They were being controlled. Kael's attunement skill picked up a faint, almost imperceptible dissonance emanating from their forms, a puppet master's string of corrupted harmony. These were not mindless beasts. They were extensions of the cultist's will, weaponized dissonance. The blighted bear charged first, its roar a broken, grating sound. Kael immediately activated resonance reinforcement, surrounding himself with a shimmering golden aura. The bear's corrupted claws scraped against the field, fizzling and sparking, unable to fully penetrate. He had to disable them without killing them if possible. They were victims. He thought of the prime chord of growth, of its essence of healing and restoration. Could he use music to reverse the corruption? He began to play, a slow, gentle melody, a lullaby of rejuvenation. He focused his intent on the blighted bear, aiming to counter the dissonance that controlled it, to sing it back to its true nature. New skill created. Harmonic restoration. Rank C. Description: a restorative melody that attempts to cleanse minor dissonance from corrupted creatures, returning them to their natural state. Less effective on highly corrupted targets. Mana cost: 40. The melody flowed from his lute, a warm, golden wave that washed over the blighted bear. The creature roared in confusion, its corrupted aura flickering violently as the music fought against the dissonant control. The bear stumbled, momentarily pausing its attack, but the other two blighted creatures, the wolf and the stag, were relentless. They attacked from either side. Kael was forced to use Torrent of Harmony, blasting the blighted wolf away with a wave of sound. The stag, however, was too fast. Its corrupted antlers, wreathed in dark energy, gored his side. Pain flared. His vitality surge kicked in, staunching the bleeding, but his concentration wavered. The blighted bear, its corruption only partially purged, roared and lunged again. He was being overwhelmed. He couldn't sustain harmonic restoration and fight two more powerful blighted creatures at once. He needed a way to buy time, to control the battlefield. He needed to use the essence of growth, but in a defensive way. His gaze fell upon the ancient redwood trees around him. Their immense, rooted power, their unyielding presence. He played a deep, resonating chord, pushing all of his remaining mana into it. He focused his intent on the ground itself, on the very life force of the grove. New skill created. Rooted shield. Rank C. Description: causes massive living roots to erupt from the ground, forming a temporary sturdy barrier. Can also ensnare nearby enemies. Mana cost: 50. With a thunderous rumble, the earth around Kael convulsed. Massive, gnarled roots, thick as a man's waist, burst from the ground, forming an impenetrable barrier around him. The blighted wolf and stag were caught in the eruption, ensnared and pinned by the writhing roots. The blighted bear, still partially affected by harmonic restoration, stumbled into the root barrier, its corrupted aura sputtering as the pure resonance of the living wood pushed against its dissonance. Kael, protected by his impromptu shield, returned his focus to the blighted bear, pouring the last of his mana into harmonic restoration. The gentle, healing melody washed over the bear, fighting against the remnants of corruption. Slowly, painstakingly, the dark aura around the bear receded. Its fur regained a faint, natural sheen. Its eyes, once vacant, held a flicker of confusion, then fear. The bear, now purged of the dissonance control, let out a confused whine, then turned and lumbered away, fleeing deeper into the grove. It was free. Kael leaned against the newly formed root shield, exhausted but triumphant. He had saved the bear, and he had gained another piece of the world's song. His control over the very essence of growth was strengthening. He still had one prime chord left to learn, the celestial spire. He had to reach it and absorb the prime chord of Aether before the Dissonant Cultists could awaken their behemoth and shatter the world symphony forever. The stakes were higher than ever, and his music was the only hope. The journey to the Celestial Spire was the most perilous yet. The dissonance had grown bolder, its tendrils reaching into settled lands, sowing discord and fear. Reports from villages spoke of crops dying overnight, of animals falling silent, of adventurers finding their skills suddenly inert. The Dissonant Cultists were no longer subtle. Their grand ritual was approaching its climax, and they were attempting to weaken the very fabric of the world in preparation. Kael himself felt the encroaching pressure. The dissonance proximity meter in his interface was rarely below 70% now. Even with his vitality surge and enhanced mana regeneration, he found himself constantly playing subtle counter-harmonies, small, soothing melodies to ward off the insidious influence. His lute, once a mere instrument, felt like an extension of his soul, a shield against the creeping silence. The Celestial Spire was a mountain unlike any other. Its peak soared above the clouds, a needle of pure, crystalline rock that seemed to pierce the heavens. Legend said it was a direct conduit to the system's celestial core, a place where the very air sang with divine energy. This was where he would find the prime chord of Aether. Climbing the spire was a challenge in itself. The air thinned, and the winds howled with a fierce, unpredictable dissonance that threatened to rip his harmonies apart. He used Whisper of the Wind to guide his climbing, using small gusts to push him upward to stabilize his footing. He deployed Rooted Shield to create handholds and temporary ledges where none existed, weaving paths of living wood up the sheer rock face. His dexterity and fluid motion made him agile, light-footed, a dancer on the edge of the abyss. As he climbed higher, the dissonance became more concentrated. He saw shadowy, humanoid figures clinging to the higher reaches of the mountain. Dissonant Cultists, reinforcing the ambient anti-melody around the spire. They were guarding it, ensuring no one could reach the prime chord. He had to avoid them. He used minor camouflage to blend into the shadows of the rock face and only moved when their backs were turned. Finally, after a grueling climb that tested every fiber of his being, he reached the summit. It was a vast, flat plateau of shimmering, milky white crystal. The sky above was a swirling canvas of iridescent colors, the aurora borealis dancing in a perpetual display. And the air here was not just silent, but utterly devoid of physical sound. Yet, Kael's attunement skill was overwhelmed by the most complex, most beautiful melody he had ever perceived. It was pure thought, pure energy, a chorus of cosmic vibrations, of starlight and stardust, of the unseen forces that held the universe together. This was the prime chord of Aether, the song of pure energy, of raw potential. He sat in the center of the crystalline plateau, cross-legged, his lute resting on his knees. He closed his eyes and began to play. This was not a melody of earth and water, of growth and flow. This was a melody of the heavens, of pure, resonant energy. He played the silence of space, the brilliant flash of creation, the subtle dance of gravity. He played the song of pure ether. He poured his entire being into the music. His mana flared, drawn from the deepest wellsprings of his soul. He played for hours until the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery hues, and his fingers were numb from the intensity. He felt his consciousness expand, reaching out into the cosmos, feeling the vast, silent hum of the universe itself. His harmonic insight showed him the intricate weave of energy that formed all magic, all life, all thought. It was all ether, all resonance, prime chord of Aether perceived and internalized. New skill fragment acquired. Etheric sight. Passive. Description. User can perceive magical energy flows and subtle aural shifts more clearly. Magic resistance. Increased by 5%. Resonance attribute increased by 3 points. Mana pool increased by 10%. You have gained 1,000 EXP. Kael opened his eyes. The world looked different. He could see the faint, shimmering lines of mana flowing through the crystalline ground, the subtle auras around distant creatures, even the faint, almost imperceptible hum of his own life force. He felt incredibly powerful, incredibly connected to the vast, overarching song of the system. He had all 3 prime chords. He was ready. But as he descended the spire, a new, far more potent dissonance began to emanate from the distant Dragon's Teeth Mountains. It was a sound that made the very air crackle, a growing, terrible anti-melody that dwarfed anything he had heard before. The cultists were beginning their final ritual. The Dissonant Behemoth was stirring. He looked at his new skills, the prime chords integrated into his being. He had fluid motion, vitality surge, and etheric sight. He had torrent of harmony, harmonic restoration, and rooted shield. He was a Maestro of Resonance, a composer of reality itself. His journey was not over. It was about to reach its grand, terrifying climax. He had to reach the Dragon's Teeth Mountains. He had to face the Dissonant Cultists. And he had to play a symphony that would either save the world or shatter it forever. The Dragon's Teeth Mountains were a jagged, perpetually storm-racked range, a place where the world's natural resonance was already chaotic, raw, and untamed. It was the perfect stage for the Dissonant Cultists' final act. As Kael approached, the dissonance proximity meter in his interface flashed a frantic red, reaching critical levels. The air was thick with it, a tangible, suffocating anti-sound that made every breath an effort. The very clouds above the mountains swirled with an unnatural, sickly purple hue crackling with static energy. His etheric sight was burning. He could see massive, corrupted ley lines, once conduits of pure magic, now twisted into conduits of dissonance, feeding a central point deep within the mountains. This was it, the source of the impending disaster. He entered a vast, natural amphitheater, a cavern open to the stormy sky. In the center, on a monstrous altar made of blackened bone and pulsating corrupted crystal, lay a colossal, skeletal figure. It was the Dissonant Behemoth, vast and terrifying, its bones slowly knitting together. With pure dissonant energy, it was not fully awake, but it was stirring, its immense, dark aura a terrifying void that swallowed the light. Around the altar, hundreds of dissonant cultists chanted their final, terrifying anti-melody. Their combined auras created a pulsating field of pure dissonance twisting the very air, making Kael's senses reel. They were performing the Shattering Symphony, using corrupted prime chords to awaken the behemoth and unravel the world. Kael's harmonic insight struggled to pierce through the overwhelming cacophony of their anti-music, but he could feel it, the subtle, devastating pattern of their Shattering Symphony. They were not just playing a single chord of nullification. They were playing inverted, corrupted versions of the prime chords themselves, a twisted anti-flow, an anti-growth, an anti-ether. They were trying to unmake reality. He drew his lute, its ashwood glowing faintly with a defiant, pure harmony. He was just one maestro against a legion of dissonant cultists and a slumbering cosmic horror. But he had the true prime chords. He had to play them. He launched himself forward, ignoring the waves of dissonance that slammed into him. He didn't try to silence them immediately. He needed to reach the altar, to focus his counter-symphony at the very heart of their ritual. He activated fluid motion, weaving through the panicked cultists, their clumsy attempts to grab him, failing as he danced through their ranks. He used Torrent of Harmony to blast clear any cultists who tried to form a cordon around the altar, sending them sprawling. He reached the edge of the altar, a scant few feet from the awakening behemoth. Its skeletal frame was now pulsing with a sickly purple light, its eye sockets beginning to glow with a malevolent, nascent consciousness. Kael stood his ground, raised his lute, and began to play. His music was not a wild attack. It was a precise, perfectly crafted counter-symphony, weaving together the three prime chords he had internalized. He began with the prime chord of flow, a cascading, powerful melody that sought to restore the natural order, to sweep away the corruption. Prime chord counter melody. Flow initiated. Description. unleashes a sweeping, restorative wave of pure resonance that actively disrupts dissonant patterns and stabilizes corrupted system energies. Mana cost, 100 per minute. The cultists nearest him cried out in agony as the pure, flowing harmony washed over them. Their corrupted auras sputtered and dissolved, their forms reverting to frightened, bewildered humans who collapsed to the ground, their memories of the dissonance influence fading into confused terror. They weren't killed, they were healed, but the behemoth continued to awaken. The cultists further back, those still chanting the Shattering Symphony, intensified their anti-melody, trying to overwhelm Kael's single harmony. He segued into the Prime Chord of Growth, a deep resonant melody that spoke of life, of renewal, of powerful, unyielding roots. Prime chord countermelody, growth initiated. Description: projects a powerful, life-affirming harmony that strengthens all natural system-bound entities and actively purifies blighted areas. Mana cost, 100 per minute. The very stone of the amphitheater, blighted and dark, began to crack, green tendrils of moss and vibrant flowers bursting forth, fighting back against the pervasive corruption. Kael's rooted shield skills seemed to activate automatically, massive living roots erupting from the ground, ensnaring and trapping more of the chanting cultists, forcing them to cease their anti-melody. The dissonant behemoth roared, a sound, like grinding tectonic plates, its eye sockets blazing with purple fire. It was almost fully awake. It raised a massive skeletal claw, its power emanating from its core. It was preparing a destructive, dissonant attack. Kael knew this was his last chance. He poured every ounce of his remaining mana, every fiber of his being, into the final, soaring melody. The prime chord of Aether, the song of pure energy, of raw potential, of the very fabric of existence. Prime chord counter melody. Aether initiated. Description: unleashes a blinding torrent of pure system energy, the ultimate counter to dissonance, causes a harmonic feedback loop in dissonant constructs and entities, overwhelming and neutralizing them. Mana cost, all remaining mana. His lute glowed with an blinding, incandescent light, a torrent of pure golden ether, a river of solidified harmony erupted from his instrument, slamming into the dissonant behemoth. The behemoth shrieked, a sound of pure agony. The raw, beautiful ether slammed into its corrupted core, initiating a massive harmonic feedback loop. The creature of chaos, unable to withstand the overwhelming order, convulsed violently. Its skeletal frame began to dissolve, its corrupted, crystal bones shattering into dust, its purple aura flickering and dying. The etheric energy flowed past the collapsing behemoth, washing over the remaining dissonant cultists. Their dark auras shattered, their chanting silenced, their bodies collapsing as the corruption was instantly purged from their souls. The dragon's teeth mountains themselves groaned, but the chaotic dissonance that had plagued them was cleansed, replaced by a pure, vibrant harmony. The storm clouds above parted, revealing a sky of brilliant, clear stars. World threat neutralized, dissonant behemoth has been purged. Major quest, seek the prime chords, complete. Massive EXP bonus, awarded, 250,000 EXP. You have leveled. Up, X20, you are now level 28. Your class has been upgraded, Apprentice Maestro, Grand Maestro, new legendary title acquired, Harmonic Guardian. All prime chord manipulation skills unlocked. Kael stood in the silent amphitheater, his lute still glowing faintly. His body trembled with exhaustion, but his heart soared. He had done it. He had played the Shattering Symphony, not of chaos, but of pure, unadulterated harmony. He had saved the world's song. He was no longer just a maestro. He was a grand maestro, a harmonic guardian. The world was his orchestra, and his music was its salvation. His symphony had just truly begun.